My name is Cameron Schmitz, and I live in Bernardston, Massachusetts, where I have my studio, my painting studio here, and where I maintain my studio practice. I've been working in the studio since 2013, and the decision to move my studio home was upon the decision for us to grow a family. So when we moved here, I was pregnant, and it was certainly a conscious choice because as a painter, um, and as a woman artist who loves the concept and idea of raising a family and raising children, my painting practice is such a important part of my life and a huge priority that I knew that I had to create the situation where I could still paint no matter what obstacles presented themselves to me. I always had a space to paint, and I think that's really important for artists in terms of setting yourself up for success. Creating a space that's always available to you where you can create. And um, and for me, that has enabled me. Having a studio at home has actually, allowed me to make that kind of transition into being a mother now of three little children, where I still paint. And and my children are very much a part of my inspiration as an artist. And in fact, I mean, there's certainly certain drawbacks to having a studio at home because you have interruptions that go on. But at the same time, when you have a very busy life, you kind of have to adapt and figure out how to carve out time out of your day to paint. So often I'm painting here in the very early mornings, and sometimes it's painting here at night after the kids go to sleep. My mother, being an artist herself, grew up in a certain time, an era where her work sold more if they thought she was a male versus a female. So her last name was at the time Strong. She found that if she signed her painting Strong versus Karen Strong, there was something about Strong that was kind of masculine, right? So she noticed correlation. If someone thought she was a male, her work sold. So she gave my sister and I names so that were gender neutral. So she named me Cameron with this idea. Now I happened to end up being an artist, but at the time it was like, oh, and I've loved having a gender neutral name because I love people not knowing whether I'm a man or a woman. I love it when people call me and say, "Is Mr. Cameron Schmitz there?" And I say, "No, he's not. May I take a message?" But it's been certainly we live in a different era, although, as we know from current events, that gender inequity and those types of prejudices certainly still exist in our society and the undercurrents and on a subliminal level. So it's not necessarily, I would say, important to me that someone says, oh, she's, like I see this through the work, but I think that's certainly an important element. In 2004, I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I chose PAFA because of its legacy of American artists and painters. I was a figurative painter at the time, and there was artists like Thomas Eakins and Mary Cassatt, artists that I was really drawn to as a figurative painter at the time at the University of New Hampshire. And when I was at PAFA, I learned so much about painting, and an interesting shift happened for me when I was in graduate school. It was, when you're in a master's program or any sort of focused program that's incredibly intense, you have this opportunity to totally delve into your medium, and it very much becomes your entire life. So I was, my going to my studio every day, and that's just what I did for those 2 years in Philadelphia. I just went to my studio every day and I painted, and I had critics come to my studio, and because I was painting so much, growth happened very quickly, right? So the more that you practice, the faster that development occurs. And during that time, I entered PAFA, painting from life, painting from observation, painting interiors and the figure. And I found myself hitting a wall one day, and there was something about what I was painting that wasn't satisfying me as a painter. It was almost as if my subject matter of these kind of representational interiors wasn't getting to the heart of what was inside of me and what needed to be expressed. And at the time, I was interested in the interior versus exterior, certainly a concept that I'm still interested in. I was also interested in the body and how our bodies are, in essence, containers for all that we've experienced in our lives. When I approach my canvas, I don't necessarily go in with any specific idea in mind. I approach the canvas with a feeling, an emotion, an experience that may have been triggered from a conversation that I had with someone, a sensation that I experienced, whether it was holding my child and, holding their little chubby foot in my hand, and the kind of warmth. And, I'm really interested in touch and relationships between people and kind of energy that we exchange, and also the kind of energy that can be documented in artwork itself. Comfort zone is a dangerous place. I am, when I started painting, when I returned back to abstract painting in 2013, it was extremely exciting to me, but simultaneously extremely uncomfortable. I felt like, what am I doing? What is this? What am I seeing? I realized that in some ways I think I loved it because I felt more out of control, and I wasn't necessarily dictating my painting, versus if I'm working from observation, it's like, here's this thing that I'm painting, and it's in some ways already kind of conceptualized, where these paintings evolve over time. I love, I look at artists who've gone through hardships, and I think that their work is so much more interesting as a result. I, people who go through tragedy, it's such an opportunity to use that in a positive way. Take like any sort of hardship or challenge that you've experienced in your life and put it towards making something. Put it towards whether you're contributing to society with a new idea that's going to help others, or whether you're communicating some sort of message that raises awareness. All of those things, I think, are such, it's just how we need to function in life in order to move forward, and in order to find joy and happiness out of life. It's, kind of assessing like your life and your surroundings and what you've been given, and what do you do with that. And that is what life is all about. That's making meaning out of your life, and that's creating meaning, in your own work, is like being reflective and saying, like, how can I talk about this experience in a way that's not only personal, but it's also universal, right? So the language that I speak is personal. This is all coming from me inside, but my ultimate goal is that it's simultaneously universal. It needs to be able to communicate on a higher level that transcends all languages, that transcends all cultural, historical, age, backgrounds. Like when, people find that working, like having a blank canvas is in some ways debilitating to people, because it's like writer's block, where you're starting and you're confronted with this beautiful white canvas. It's like almost so perfect. You're like, I don't want to touch it. But I just, advise my students when I paint, like just, and that's why I just start with a gesture. I often, when I'm teaching abstraction, it's, about just generating, like activating the surface through drawing, and seeing what comes from that, and not necessarily being concerned. Like, don't, be concerned with what it looks like. Don't be judgmental. Activate the surface, and then you respond to that, and then you're taken on this journey where you wouldn't have necessarily ever imagined yourself. And I think that is one of the most exciting things about art making, is it's magic. You know, you find yourself on these pathways that you would have never preconceived. I have a kind of instinctual and physical and emotional connection um, with oil painting. It's very experiential. Um, you know, the materiality of oil painting is very sensual, and there are really interesting things that can occur in the painting process through layering, the kind of light and luminosity that comes about through um, oil painting, whether that's through the use of glazing or layering color upon color. And so a lot of that also has to do with visual perception, how we see. I once painted this painting, and it was about, it was from a photograph from when I was a child, my sister and I opening presents on Christmas morning with my father. And the painting, this was a text-based painting, and the painting um, what I was using the word remember, and it was the figures, there was the kind of clarity that happened when light struck our hair. So like light was, coming on our hair. And so the figures' faces weren't necessarily specific to us, right? But because I was painting about this kind of memory, this feeling and emotion. Well, the woman who purchased the painting, when she encountered the painting, she started crying because it reminded her of her two daughters who had passed away. And when I found this out, she bought the painting because it reminded her of her girls. Even though the painting was about my sister and I, it was no longer about my sister and I. It was about her experience. And I found that to be, when that happened, it was like, um, that's what you want in life. When someone can, she came and she looked at that painting and she wasn't concerned about what I was thinking about the painting. She brought her own experiences to that work, and it brought back a flood of memories for her that, for whatever reason, she said, I need to have this. I need to have this in my home. This conjures up memories that she experienced with her own children. And that, to me, is such a beautiful thing. For me to provide that experience, but also to create that kind of connection with someone is so beautiful.